want to introduce you to my friend Trudy Scott and tell you a little bit more about her background. As she talks, you're going to know she's a real expert, but just a little bit about her. Trudy Scott is the author of the Anti-Anxiety Food Solution book and educates about anxious individuals and educates anxious individuals and practitioners about nutritional solutions for anxiety. Her 6th Anxiety Summit, featuring all new topics and the latest research related to anxiety and toxins, medications, and infections, is starting soon. Trudy is passionate about sharing these solutions because she experienced the first-hand results of both anxiety and how she was able to completely resolve it in her late 30s. So welcome, Trudy.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it was a pleasure to be able to interview you on my summit as well.
It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. You were so careful with your content, which I appreciate. You make sure things aren't doubled up, and we're getting really specific and giving, detailed information to people. So I appreciate that you do all that.
Well, thank you.
So you've done several of these summits, and every time you have like a different theme. So this one is toxins, medications, and infections as the root cause of anxiety. If you just tell us, like, some of you might not even know that any of those things could cause anxiety. So tell us just the basis of that.
Yes, and the important thing here is to think about things outside of trauma that could cause anxiety, because we know that trauma and life experiences can trigger anxiety, a real situation. You're in a terrifying situation and you might feel anxious, but there are other factors outside of trauma that can cause anxiety. And the main thing that I talk about, obviously, is food-based things like gluten and caffeine and sugar and gut health. The last summit we had was all on gut health, so anything to do with the microbiome. But then we've got to dig a little bit deeper and think, are there other factors that could be triggering anxiety? And one of them could be toxins, and some of the toxins that we might want to think about are fluoride, for example. Is it something like phthalates? And you and I talked a lot about phthalates in our interview. Is it something like oxalates? Oxalates are compounds that are found in foods like nuts and berries and leafy greens. Is that something that's triggering your anxiety and pain? So we've got to look a little bit deeper and think, well, could those things be actually contributing to the anxiety as well? When it comes to infections, we need to think about things like Lyme disease and Lyme co-infections like Babesia and Bartonella. Those infections can actually lower GABA, can lower serotonin, and can make us more anxious as well. And then when it comes to medications, psychiatric medications themselves, such as antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications like benzodiazepines, can actually have anxiety as a side effect. They can also cause anxiety once you get to the dose that you need higher and higher doses in order to prevent some of the symptoms. Then you can have too much of the medication can cause anxiety. And then when you discontinue the medication, you can have anxiety as well. And then the other aspect when it comes to medications that we cover in the summit are other non-psychiatric medications that can actually trigger anxiety. And a common one is Accutane, which is used for acne in teens. And there's a lot of documented research on how it can actually cause anxiety and depression and even psychosis in some individuals.
Wow.
Another one that we talk about when it comes to kids is Miralax, which is an over-the-counter product that is used for constipation. And there's a lot of moms groups that are now reporting. There's an FDA site where you can actually document cases. And psychosis and depression and anxiety are very common side effects of these medications. So we've got to just be aware of all of these as possible root causes for anxiety. It may be the only cause, or it may be contributing to whatever else is going on with you.
Okay, awesome. So a great event for people who haven't figured out all the reasons for anxiety. Maybe it's half better, but not all the way better.
And also to prevent it, maybe you've found your solution with diet, and you're sensitive to some of these things, now you can be overly cautious, and be aware that these things might be something that you need to think about in the future. And if you've been prone to the toxic effects, now you can be aware for your kids and for your family members as well. So really, really important to be aware of. And when we talk about toxins and infections, it sounds scary and it seems overwhelming. Certainly when I've just listed a few of I know there's over 50 different factors that we go into in the summit, and it can seem overwhelming. Oh my gosh, I'm already anxious. Now I've got to think about all these things. And one of the sort of themes that go through all the interviews is this theme of neurotransmitter support, and how these infections and toxins can actually lower serotonin and lower GABA levels. So what I do with all my clients is we have them do a trial of GABA and tryptophan when we first start working together, because what that does is it gives you relief right away. So now you're feeling less anxious, and it enables you to deal with all these underlying causes without feeling overwhelmed. Because when you look at the list, I mean, you think about some of these things, it can just feel daunting and too overwhelming. And I've had some people say, oh my gosh, I don't even want to dive into this, because what if I find this is an issue? What if I find this is an issue? What if I have to now do this? So if someone's looking at this list and thinking about the summit, and they my first thing that I actually talk about in my first interview is, if this feels overwhelming, could it be low serotonin that is making this feel more fearful for you, that is making it feel more overwhelming for you? And address that, and then it will feel a lot easier.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I read some of your work, and I don't remember all of it. Like which ones make you feel overwhelmed versus I don't know, emotional, or like there's different sort of shades of imbalance, and sometimes you can use that to say, oh, that's probably low melatonin or etc., right?
Yeah. So with the low serotonin, it's the worry in the head and the imagining the worst. And oh my gosh, this is going to happen to me, sort of doom and gloom kind of feeling, the negative self-talk, the lack of confidence, the pessimism versus being an optimist. And then with low serotonin, you'll also have PMS, you'll have irritability, anger, um, insomnia, and then the cravings with low serotonin are afternoon cravings and evening cravings. So you've got to have some carbohydrate late afternoon or in the evening. So that's low serotonin. And the amino acid that we use to address that is tryptophan, so or 5-HTP. And
Okay.
we talk about that in a lot of the interviews. I have Dr. Michael Murray doing a whole interview on 5-HTP, and the information about 5-HTP and sleep is phenomenal. And head-to-head studies with some of these amino acids, comparing them with antidepressants and finding that they are as effective or more effective, and we don't have all the side effects. So I'm a big fan of the amino acids. Let me just go through the other categories, and
Okay.
then, or if you've got a question now, do you want to ask a question now? It sounded like you might have a question.
No, I like the idea of going through it. Let's go through.
Okay. Then with low GABA, you'll have physical tension. So you'll feel it in your neck, in your shoulders. You'll feel stiff and tense muscles, maybe in your legs. You'll have that feeling like a sort of fear in the pit of your stomach. That's a sort of a tension in your gut feeling. A lot of people with anxiety will say, I've got butterflies in my stomach. That's that sort of fear that you have in your stomach. And then with low GABA, you also have the overwhelm. And so sometimes that overwhelm can be low serotonin, sometimes it can be low GABA. And the way to figure it out is to do a trial of one of the amino acids. So you look at these symptoms, you rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, and then you do a trial of tryptophan and you see, does it help? Or you do a trial of GABA and you say, oh, does it help? Then you know that you are addressing one of the root causes of the anxiety. The other big thing, Bridgit, with low GABA is this desire to self-medicate with alcohol. So a lot of the moms that I work with, they've got to have that glass of wine at the end of the day to wind down. and it's self-medication. It's using alcohol in order to relax and calm down. That's a big clue that low GABA may be one of your issues. Then the other three categories that I work with in terms of amino acid support are low endorphins. And with low endorphins, you have the emotional feeling. It's emotional pain or physical pain. And with certainly one of the examples that I talk about in the summit is using something to raise your endorphin levels. If you've had mold toxicity and you've lost all your possessions in your home, you've lost photographs, you've lost books, you've got to get rid of your possessions, and you just feel, just totally emotional about it, and sort of lost, and almost yeah, and you can relate. You've had you've had mold
Yep.
toxicity, and that feeling of devastation. There's an amino acid called DPA, which I call a hug in a bottle. It's like giving you a big hug, and it gives you that endorphin support. So it helps with the emotional pain. If you've had a loss like mold toxicity, if you've had a death in the family, endorphins support is absolutely amazing. It also helps with physical pain. So with low endorphins, you'll have that emotional pain, and you'll also have the physical pain. And then with the endorphins, the craving that we have with that one is, I deserve it. This is my treat. I've had a rough day. I've had a rough week. I deserve a bowl of ice cream. And if you feel like you deserve it, that could be low endorphins. And then the amino acid for that one is DPA, D-phenylalanine. And then the other two is low blood sugar, and the amino acid for that is glutamine. And when you've got low blood sugar, you're going to feel cranky and irritable, and you're going to crave something sweet as well. And then with low catecholamines, you feel blah, negative, poor focus, low motivation, and the amino acid for that one is tyrosine. So all of these amino acids can be an issue for some people. Some of them it's more than one. Other times it's just one or two. But we're using them in conjunction with looking at all of these toxins and infections and medications that may be driving low levels of the neurotransmitters. And the great thing is they start to give you relief right away. And it enables you to break that addiction for the wine, for the cookies, for the ice cream, without having to white knuckle it. And it makes it less overwhelming to deal with all these other things that you have to deal with.
Yeah, and I've had mixed kind of results, I guess, with amino acids, but I just took some today, and I think like the worse you are, the more you can see it work. So if you're like fully, panic attacking and just really, then you can like, oh. Whereas if you're just like, well, I'm, just wanting to try this out, I'm generally a little anxious. I don't know what you find, Trudy, but I find it like it seems more dramatic when my state is more dramatic. What do you find?
Well, I found them to work across the board.
Okay.
The key is to figure out which one it is, because a lot of people will hear, oh, GABA, my friend used GABA, that's got to be going to work for me. So if you use GABA and your anxiety is not because of low GABA, then it's not going to work. So the key is to with all of these categories, the low serotonin, low GABA, low endorphins, low blood sugar, and low catecholamines, do the questionnaire, rate your symptoms on a scale of 1 to 10, and then trial them one at a time, and then see how they work. So I've got if you're looking at low serotonin, my overwhelm, my worry, my negativity is a 10 out of 10. Trial a tryptophan on its own with nothing else, and then see what the results are. And I like to have my clients open up the capsule, because you get the best effects that way. You're getting the results very quickly. You'll see results within 5 minutes. Open up the capsule and see what kind of results you get. And then you start at a certain dose, like with tryptophan, you start at 500 milligrams. If it brings the symptoms down 1 or 2 notches, that's great, but you need more. So then you go up to two of the 500 milligrams. Now it brings it down 2 more notches. Then you go up to 3 of the 500 milligrams, and it brings it down to something that's now you're feeling pretty good. So it's very individualized, and it's adjusting the dose based on your unique needs. And that seems to work the best. And certainly with GABA, GABA does always need to be sublingual. GABA swallowed does not seem to work. And that's where a lot of people will say, I've tried GABA, it didn't really work. And I hear that's the same from practitioners saying, well, I'm not really sure if GABA works. Are you talking about GABA or any of the particular amino acids?
Well, actually, there's a question from KB on here, and she was saying she tried, I don't know if you can see it, tried 5-HTP, had bad dreams, somewhat better with L-tryptophan. And she said, any suggestions taking a lower dose now?
So that's a great question. Some people do better with tryptophan, some do better with 5-HTP. And I always start with tryptophan just because I've chosen to do that and I've had really good results. Tryptophan is closer to being a food, so that might be the reason. The other thing is that 5-HTP can actually raise cortisol levels, and that can make you more anxious and more edgy. And so it's a matter of trial and error and trying it out. So if she's saying that KB, if you're doing better with tryptophan, as I said, figure out what your sort of starting dose is and then increase it slowly but surely. I have my clients increase once a week or every 2 weeks, depending on how comfortable they feel doing that. But if you're feeling, yes, you're getting some benefits, we always want to capitalize on what we are getting and then increase from there. The other thing that's central to the work that I'm doing with my clients is looking at pyroluria, which is the social anxiety condition where you have this sort of inattention and you have this, you don't like socializing and you kind of consider yourself an introvert, and you have PMS type symptoms or any kind of hormonal imbalance. And the protocol for that is zinc and B6 and evening primrose oil. And those nutrients help to make our neurotransmitters. So most of my clients are using the amino acids, and they also on the pyroluria protocol, and then that helps because you're providing the raw materials for making the neurotransmitters. Zinc is key as a cofactor, vitamin B6 is key, magnesium is also key. So they're on a multivitamin as well. So that might help. And then she also, KB also says, taking a lower dose. If you take too much, you can actually feel worse. So for some people, 500 milligrams of tryptophan as a starting dose may be too much. So for we call them our pixie dust people, they just need tiny, tiny little amounts. I may even start someone on 100 milligrams of tryptophan. And the way that you do that is you open a capsule and you just sprinkle a little bit on your tongue, and that might be enough. So if you're feeling that you're feeling worse on a higher dose, then you may want to go to a smaller dose. So hopefully that helped.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, there was one other question from Marie, just wondering if she has to take tryptophan in the evening only.
The ideal is for tryptophan to be taken mid-afternoon and evening, because that's when serotonin takes a dip. So we'll typically start mid-afternoon, and then we'll also do the evening. If someone's having a sleep problem, we maybe do one mid-afternoon, and if sleep's an issue, we may end up doing 2 or 3 in the evening. So it can change the dosing depending on what's going on with each person. Occasionally, I've had some people feel that they do fine with tryptophan in the day. You think, well, if it's helping sleep, is it going to make me sleepy? For some people, it's fine in the day. For others, I've found that taking the tryptophan mid-afternoon and evening works, and then doing 5-HTP in the day. So it's a mix and match type of situation. But I like to start mid-afternoon and evening and then go from there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And somebody asked where they can see the quiz and stuff. And obviously, we're getting a lot of information from Trudy, but it's not quite enough for you to go out to the store. You're going to have some gaps. So I really recommend her book. It's easy to find on Amazon. And I don't know if it's anywhere else, Trudy, but then you can go over everything in detail and be like, okay, this sounds like me. And she'll have stuff written out there about protocol.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, the book's available everywhere, online and Amazon, and the whole questionnaire is in the book. The questionnaire is also on my blog, so folks can look at that. But I agree, Bridgit, this is powerful nutritional interventions that have a huge impact. And they are pretty amazing. You'll see results very quickly, but it's very important to be informed and educated about using these. I've written my book and I do my work to empower people to implement this on their own if they choose to. Some people feel too overwhelmed and they want to work with a practitioner, or they want to do one of my group programs. So do what you feel comfortable with, but do it smartly. Be empowered. There are some contraindications if you're on an SSRI using tryptophan or 5-HTP. There's a potential for serotonin syndrome. So you do need to be smart about this as you use these amino acids.
Okay, awesome. Barbara had a good question, and then we'll move on. Is it something you can find these at a health store, or you have to go online, or what?
Some of them are at a health store. The GABA that I use is Source Naturals GABA, and you can just buy that over the counter. You can also buy it from various online stores. The tryptophan that I use, can I mention a brand name?
Yeah, I don't mind.
The tryptophan that I really like is Lidkey tryptophan, LIDT. Had a number of people. I remember one woman come and do one of my group programs, and she'd been using a tryptophan that was not a Lidkey brand and had some benefits. And I said, look, why don't we just switch you to Lidkey and just see if that gives you more benefits? And the change was very powerful. And I've seen that over the years where people have said, yeah, I've used tryptophan, this various brand, that various brand, and they've switched to Lidkey tryptophan, and that one was way superior. And there's there was this quality issue with tryptophan a number of years ago. It was pulled off the market because of possible contamination with some GMO materials. So quality, I think, is really important. And certainly in terms of effectiveness, I just love it. And I don't get paid by Lidkey to say this. That's just really, really good. 5-HTP is pretty much the same wherever you buy it from. Some 5-HTPs will have B6 added to it. And as I said earlier, B6 helps with making serotonin. So the DPA that I mentioned, D-phenylalanine, there's two companies that make that. Lidkey actually makes a product called Endorphagen, and that's that one's great. You'll also see DLPA, and that's got some of that converts to tyrosine, and some of that converts to the endorphin support. But people who have anxiety, the DLPA can be a little bit triggering for some people. So that's why I like the DPA.
It's funny. I think we're both friends with Mickey Contini, right?
Yes.
Okay. So she had me in on that Endorphagen, but I don't think it's a fit for me based on this, list. Like it works for her for when she's emotional. Like it's not as much of. I think I need some different substances. So
yeah, it's very, very different. And actually, she did well with Endorphagen for the emotional support. She also did really well with GABA, and she's given me permission to share this. In one of the interviews, in the Lyme interview, I share Mickey's story with GABA and how in the midst of her dealing with mold interview, in the midst of her discovering that she had a mycotoxin exposure, and this is what was, they were coming in looking at her home and they were remediating her home. She was having very severe panic attacks. She didn't realize at the time that they were panic attacks. She said her husband took her to the ER a number of times. She thought she was having a heart attack. That's how scary it was. And she reached out to me and I said, get on some GABA, look at some tryptophan support. And she got on GABA, and she said, she actually said, I was eating GABA calm like it was candy. As soon as I would feel anxious, I'd take some GABA calm and it would calm me right down. So it was amazing for her while she was in the midst of dealing with the anxiety and the panic attacks. And I'm actually a GABA girl. I'm a big fan of GABA because when I had my anxiety and panic attacks in my late 30s, GABA was a lifesaver for me. It was amazing. And I still need it periodically if I've injured my back. I needed GABA when I had a scary plane ride and I ended up with a vagus nerve issue and problems with my voice. So over the years, I've really benefited from GABA. So, I can recognize it when people say GABA really works. It really does. But sublingually, it needs to be sublingual. And the GABA Calm from Source Naturals is sublingual. So that's why it's very effective. If you're using a higher dose GABA, I've got some nice combinations in my store that are GABA and theanine, then you need to open up the capsule and put it on your tongue for it to be as effective.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking at the one I'm taking and another one. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I've been noticed. I'll just share a little story. Like, I just moved and it's like a lot of change. I'm just noticing a lot more anxiety. And one thing I'm noticing is caffeine is not good for me right now. During this quarantine, I got, I can't go anywhere. So I was kind of like getting more into caffeine and kind of building a tolerance. And now I'm like, I can just even like one sip, I can feel my anxiety rising. So it's just interesting to see. Like, right now is just not a time for that for me. And I've really had to kind of go back and experiment with some of the things I've already purchased and essential oils and just all the things. And like she was talking about having them frequently, it's like sometimes I feel better and then an hour later I'm ramped up again. So I think there's times in your life where you need that frequent intervention, just because otherwise the day is pretty rough when you
Yeah,
drink this
definitely.
stuff.
And then with caffeine, it's actually people will have problems with it, then go back on it and think they're fine, but it's depleting you. It's depleting you of zinc. Over time, it's like sugar, it depletes you of zinc. So now you're getting lower and lower and lower zinc. So then you get to the point where you can't tolerate it anymore. So keep that in mind. And
Okay.
it's a big trigger for a lot of my clients with anxiety. And it's a simple thing. We're talking about using the amino acids, but if you're still on caffeine and you're still on gluten and you're still having a lot of sugar, you've got to think about those things too, because it's not just an amazing amino acid that's going to change your life. It may be some of those lifestyle things. For a lot of people, it's both. And the amino acids make it easy to quit those chocolates or the caffeine or
Got it.
I see a lot of people eating dark chocolate, and that's really high in caffeine. And that can be a trigger for anxiety. As healthy as it is, if you are sensitive, if you are, there's a subset of people that are more prone to the effects of caffeine, that could be a trigger for you. So just be aware of that.
Okay. That's really helpful. Yeah, and like while I was doing all this, I was off, wasn't as good with my vitamins. I didn't even know where they were, that kind of thing. So probably was like a double whammy because I really wasn't taking my magnesium either, which I love to take normally. So probably all the things combined. I'm going to screen share and show your summit and kind of go back to some of the questions you sent me, but I like to kind of walk through the page with the host and let you, kind of highlight things that you find, particularly interesting. Actually, let me stop for a second and I'll share your questions one more time. So we'll kind of circle back to this infections and medication and toxins. Let's see, you wanted to cover, we talked a little bit about some of the examples of medications. I don't think we've talked about liver support yet, which I bet people would love to hear about. Yeah, anything else you want to cover, Trudy, as we look at your page?
So I'm not seeing it now. You were.
Yeah, I'll have to pull it. Sorry about that. Pull it
Okay.
back up. There you go. Let's see, it's trying to show something else. There we go.
And it's good that we've gone through the neurotransmitters and the amino acids here, because they come up in all the interviews. We do some deep dives in some of the interviews, but they do actually, there's a common theme through all the interviews. So it's good that folks in your community are going to have a good understanding of the amino acids before going into the summit. So yeah.
Perfect. This one on liver function looks really interesting.
Yes, Dr. Amit is wonderful. He actually lives in Kenya, and his liver talks are always fantastic. So he talks a lot about the connection between hormone balance, and we don't often think about how involved the liver is when it comes to thyroid the thyroid hormones, how important the liver is when it comes to progesterone and GABA. And there's a very strong connection between GABA and progesterone, and then also estrogen and serotonin. So, and then of course, bile production is so important when it comes to toxins. Bile is used to help process our hormones, as well as external toxins like pesticides and phthalates. So we've got to have a good liver function and good production of bile in order to escort those toxins out of the body. So yeah, his interview is great.
Awesome. Yeah. And Christina, I'm a big fan of. I love that whole topic of lymphatic detox at night. I think most people still don't know much about that. It's so fascinating.
Yes, very fascinating. And we brought it back to the neurotransmitters as well. She talks about, so for folks who don't know what it is, the lymphatic system is like a lymph system in the brain. And when you sleep well, the lymph system is working in the brain and it's helping to get rid of toxins. But we talk about lead toxicity and how lead toxicity can actually impact there's an aquaporin system in the lymphatic system, which helps with getting rid of the toxins, and lead can impact that and lower GABA levels in the brain. So, and then that can make the detox of the brain less effective. And I didn't know that. I didn't know about the GABA connection. So it's very interesting to think, well, maybe if I'm taking GABA as a supplement, it's going to help with this physical tension, but maybe it's going to be starting to help with detox of the brain as well. So we're learning so much about GABA, as more and more research comes out. And as I interview these amazing experts, I get to learn too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think I wrote near the intro for this, and like, I don't know anyone else who knows more about anxiety than you. And part of it is you've interviewed so many people. I know you're a voracious researcher too. So I'm so thankful, because this topic is, when you're experiencing it, or your child is, it can be really debilitating. So
yeah,
this is great. And I love the mix with that toxicity, of course. So
yes, of course. Well, you're the expert in toxins. So.
Yeah, I'm like, toxins cause that? Yes, I mean, toxins can cause so many things, and you don't necessarily think anxiety with them. This one's interesting about pans and pandas, so that's cool. Let me see what gets to your other speakers here. So some of those we saw. Yeah, I was wondering if Elisa was covering pans and pandas.
Yes, great interview with Elisa, Dr. Elisa Song on pans and pandas. So this is, interestingly, her focus is with kids, and if they have the sudden onset, well, the initial thinking is sudden onset OCD, severe anxiety. She mentioned some of the other symptoms like baby talk, nightmares, but adults can actually have sudden onset OCD, and it also can be related to some kind of underlying infection. In this case, pandas has traditionally been considered strep, but it can be any underlying infection that can trigger this autoimmune condition, and what she's shared is it doesn't have to be sudden onset. Traditionally, we've thought about it as being sudden onset, your child is fine or you're doing fine, and then 2 weeks later, they've totally become obsessive and have OCD and severe anxiety or panic attacks or some kind of mental health condition, within a week or two. But she's also seen it be a slow progression where over the course of 6 months, the child actually gets worse and worse and worse. So, we've always got to consider underlying infections when there's any kind of mental health issue.
Okay. Mark Hyman experienced quite a bit with mold, didn't he, in his own history? Or maybe he didn't talk about that. Oh yeah, he talks about mold. Okay. Yeah. And red light I've been reading more about. Sounds super. I want to buy a red light. Sounds like so many benefits. So that's cool.
Yeah, I'm amazed at how it supports serotonin production. There may be, we know it helps to lower cortisol levels, so thereby it can help with the other neurotransmitter production. And you can see that in the title here, we talk about benzodiazepines. So benzos can be very, very difficult to taper. And based on what I learned while I was getting ready for the interview with Ari Witten, is that there's this possibility that it may actually help with benzodiazepine tapering. And I asked him about it. He hadn't had any direct experience, but he thinks there may be a potential to help with benzodiazepine tapering, because it can be very challenging for a lot of people. So yes, jam-packed, and of course it helps with toxins as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've got an order,
Oh, nice.
and
Coming.
I'm looking forward to getting mine.
Oh, great. Yeah, I think they're fairly affordable, so I want to get in on one too. Okay, cool. Kara Fitzgerald is so detailed. I like her work for sure. Hyla Cass has been in this space a long time. All these people are really great. Um, Anything you want to particularly point out here in any of this?
With Hyla Cass, she's, obviously an integrative psychiatrist. We talk about the SSRIs and the benzodiazepines, but we also talk about alcohol and this whole thing about social drinking and self-medicating with alcohol, and how using alcohol as a tool. Some people use it to try and sleep, and it can actually make sleep worse. And just being aware that there's no judgment. It's not a bad trait if you are over consuming alcohol. It's a brain chemical imbalance. And just like we can use the amino acids to help with these sugar cravings and get off the gluten and get off the caffeine, the amino acids can help with quitting that addiction to the alcohol as well. And the amino acids are used in treatment centers that are, using an integrative approach to help stop with alcohol. And they're also used for street drugs like heroin. So they are very powerful for breaking that addiction.
Interesting. Cool. So I know you wanted
There we
to,
have Bridgit.
I know not to be all about me, but I know you wanted to talk about what we covered to kind of highlight
Yes,
that.
let's talk a little bit about that, because when we met, you talked about hyperbaric oxygen treatment, and you were thinking of getting a machine yourself, and you've since got a machine. Is there anything you can share about that?
Yeah. Well, it's actually kind of interesting. So yeah, I had some positive experience with hyperbaric oxygen. Trudy wanted to hear more about it and some of the research, so we covered that. And I had been looking at Craigslist, and I found one again. It was like half off, so I bought it. But I was just showing my house and like finding a new house, and a lot was going on. So I set it up at my parents' house and was using it while I was there. But I think I took it on too quickly, and I was also just sort of going through a lot. So I think I had an Epstein-Barr flare-up that I couldn't identify right away. I got COVID testing. I was just off.
Oh, wow.
And I was using my hyperbaric oxygen because it was there. And some of the protocol is like an hour a day for 30 days. And but then I wasn't feeling well, and my parents were like, maybe it's your oxygen chamber. I'm like, no. But I started to look some things up, and one thing that can happen, especially like they use it for Lyme, is it does cause some detox, and some people can't be doing it every day. You really should start with like just once or twice a week, which I should have read, but that's the kind of person I am. I'm like, oh, I got it. Let's hop in there. So I think I should not have started so quickly. So I'm still going to use, it's actually still there. I just moved in. I have to move it back down here. So I'm just going to start out once a week, go to twice a week. I actually do think it was making my brain work better. Like my brain function has been pretty good lately. So I don't know like what was what, but a lot was going on. And sometimes you have to take away some variables. So I'm going to just go back to that much slower going forward. But other than that, once we figured out how to get it set up and stuff, it's easy to use, just like taking a little nap in there for an hour. So I should just probably report back once I get back on the horse.
Good to get that feedback, and go slow and then listen to your body. So if you're doing something and then you've got to sort of figure out what new thing did I add, and then it's quite hard when you're in the midst of it yourself, and if you're not feeling good, then you got to try and figure out what it is. But I'm glad you figured that out. Yeah, sometimes you've got to go slow, definitely.
Yeah, I'm so guilty of this. I like need to write a note to myself. Every time I try something new, I just go full force. And I you think I would learn. But I'm still excited about it. And there isn't as much published about using it when you've had mold or had, so a lot of stuff is published around brain trauma. But what's happening when you've had this toxicity trauma, so to speak, and I think that's less published. So yeah, maybe that's something I can contribute to. So
Yes, that would be amazing, because I'm
yeah,
sure it's stirring up a lot of things. I just saw a little comment pop up. Could it be, someone said, could it be related to the fact that you're having an adverse effect related to some kind of Lyme infection? So who knows what it's stirring
it
up. So
could, because I've
yeah,
never tested for Lyme, but when you have mold, Lyme is just so like prevalent, and
it is.
I've meant to, about that. So yeah, I've always meant to be tested for Lyme, and I never have, and it made me think, if I'm reacting like this, maybe I do have Lyme. Uh, who knows? It was a lot going on at once, so it's kind of hard to tell. So when I
Yeah.
start back up, hopefully I'll get a better idea.
Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
slow. And
So
so in Darren Ingalls' talk, right there, we talk about his approach to Lyme disease, which is a herbal approach. And he's actually my Lyme doctor. I don't know
nice.
if you know, but I was diagnosed with Lyme disease about 3 years ago. And it's something that I had suspected of over the years, but it just got worse and worse. And I was actually bitten by a tick in South Africa over 25 years ago.
Wow.
And there's a possibility that I was bitten since then, because I spent 25 years hiking and backpacking and rock climbing throughout America. So there's a possibility I was bitten again since then. I don't remember a bullseye wound from the since then, but I did definitely have one in South Africa. So um, whether it was from then or whether it was more recent tick bite or something else, I don't know. But in this interview with Darren, I share my Lyme story, and how
Great.
using a herbal approach has been amazing. I'm still on the journey. It's never over, I don't think. But I was out of it for a few years, and he's been amazing. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, super nice guy too. So if you want to learn, I love this one on children and teens. I had a friend whose young child was, I don't know if you want to say experiencing psychosis, but he got on a bunch of really strong medications for adults, and it got a lot worse. So I think it's an important one to be
Yeah.
aware of.
And Nicole talks about the over medication, how so many kids are just being over medicated, medication where they're on multiple medications. And she
Mhm.
actually talks about kids as young as 18 months being prescribed some of these psychiatric medications, which is just terrifying to me, especially when we know that there's so many powerful nutritional interventions. And looking at some of these toxins are important. One of the things that we hear about in a lot of the interviews is how prenatal exposure to toxins can cause anxiety in children. Phthalates, for example, is one of them. BPA, insecticides, pesticides. If the mom has been exposed, the child is more predisposed to anxiety and ADHD. But it doesn't mean that there's not an answer. It doesn't mean that we need to use medications. It just means that we need to help with detox for the child, and then get them on a good nutritional protocol, a good diet, and using some of these amino acids to help counter the fact that now those toxins have lowered their GABA levels or lowered their serotonin or lowered their zinc. So she's an amazing combination, Dr. Birkin. She's a combination of psychologist and nutritionist, which I just love that she brings both of those to the table.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think EMS very much could relate to anxiety, insomnia, like you're listing here. So that's a great one to consider, especially if you have the leaky brain, is what I find. Then you're more sensitive to EMS, seems like. So
Yes.
yeah.
And
Okay.
Lloyd is great. It was a great interview. It was,
Yeah, he knows
all
his
of them
stuff.
are great. I love all of them.
Yeah, you've done a great job with, oh, here's one on fluoride. People might be interested in that. So that's a good one. Here's you. And we talked a bit about this. So if you want to know more, here's more on the tryptophan and GABA. Oh, Julie's so great too. Talking about kids, I would imagine, or she
No,
popped
we
up.
actually talk about oxalates in
Okay.
this interview. Yeah, dietary
Okay.
oxalates and how it can contribute to anxiety and pain. It's a big factor in the autism community, a big factor with women with bladder issues, with vulvodynia, and dietary oxalates are way under appreciated as being a problem. And with a lot of people concerning drinking green smoothies, if they're starting to get problems after starting to consume a lot of green smoothies, you need to think about whether oxalates are an issue.
Okay. I would love to listen to this one with Dr. Farasian. It sounds really interesting. Loss of chemical tolerance. It's a good one. I'll try to wrap up here. Jessica is our mutual friend here, talking about some women's issues, etc. Okay, and Nikki talks about childhood traumas and that kind of thing.
Excuse me.
That's some great, yeah, these are some great, really specific topics. Awesome. Still going. There's the one on 5-HTP I think you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Oh, this is toxins exposure through military time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Military service. Yeah, that's really common. Okay. Great. Awesome. Well, anything else you want to share, Trudy? I put the link again in the chat. Starts November 2nd, so pretty soon. Yeah, and if it's something this is something that's affecting you really directly, you always have the option to buy the event and have the transcripts and that kind of thing, so you can just go back and reference what people said and get the the dosaging or whatever they're recommending. So awesome. And yeah, anything else you want to share before we wrap up here?
Are there any other questions that we
want
to answer?
Oh yeah, there are a little bit here.
You let me know which one.
KB said, "Is Hashimoto's trigger OCD?"
There's definitely the possibility. Hashimoto's can be triggered by some kind of infection. In some cases, there's many triggers for Hashimoto's. Obviously, gluten is a big one in terms of dietary, but certainly underlying infections can be a trigger. So that could be, I wouldn't say that Hashimoto's is triggering the OCD. I would say there's some kind of underlying infection that may be triggering the Hashimoto's and the OCD. So as far as OCD goes, my first approach is to address serotonin. So using tryptophan, getting some of the OCD type symptoms reduced, and then we would add in inositol on top of that if we're not getting resolution with the tryptophan, and that can help eliminate those obsessive behaviors or thinking. And then you've got to dig deeper and figure out what the real trigger is, what the trigger is that's causing the low serotonin.
Great. Well, maybe we'll take this question last. Barbara asked, what makes us crave dark chocolate?
What makes us crave dark chocolate? So with any of the cravings, the way to think of it is think about why do you want it? And then if you have it, how do you feel afterwards? So if you want it, if you're feeling stressed and then you have dark chocolate and then you feel calm afterwards, that tells you it's low GABA. But if you feel very emotional and you're thinking, well, I've had a rough week, I deserve my dark chocolate, and then you have someone, and then you have some, and then you feel, okay, well, I got my chocolate, I feel good, I deserved it, then it's low endorphins. If you are using it in the afternoon or maybe at bedtime, in the after dinner, and it's you using it to feel happier, you feel sad, and then you take have the dark chocolate and you feel happy, that could be low serotonin. So I always say to my clients, whatever the craving is, do ask yourselves those questions. And then next time you're feeling that emotional feeling that I deserve it, or I need to feel happy, or I need to calm down, an amino acid instead, and then you'll probably say, oh, okay, I'm not even thinking about the dark chocolate. So that's the way to do it.
Well, I like that you're introducing us to these amino acids. There's probably more to learn, but it's nice to have those substances that give us a quick result. And I think that most people aren't very familiar with amino acids and how to use them. So yeah, go back and listen again, or get the book, or attend the summit and you're making me want to go to the store tonight and get a couple things and try them out again, because it is a nice thing when you're in the thick of it to get some relief.
Good.
Well, thanks, Trudy, so much for coming on. I know you're busy right now, but we're happy to support your event. Thanks for having me on, and we'll just keep going. When you're on Summit 22, we'll still be recording.
Well, thank you for being on, and thanks for having me today. And thanks everyone for all the great questions.
Great questions, everyone. Yeah. Appreciate it. See you next week. Bye.